Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, let's kick things off with a question that might just bend your mind a bit. How can a country, like smaller than a football stadium, possibly hold one of the most unique genetic footprints in all of Europe? We're talking about Liechtenstein today, that tiny microstate, tucked neatly between Switzerland and Austria. And believe me, it's known for a lot more than just, well, its picturesque castles and, frankly, its immense wealth. Yeah, see, the scientists have found something truly fascinating there, a genetic anomaly, really. And it's not just baffling researchers, it's also sharply dividing scholars. It's sparking these really deep conversations about things like isolation, population purity, even human evolution itself. So in this deep dive, we're going to pull back the curtain, look at what scientists have actually uncovered with it. The hard data is telling us, and also the fierce debates swirling around all this. Our mission, really, is to help you understand why this incredibly unique genetic landscape matters. And we're drawing on some extensive research and insights into Liechtenstein's remarkable genetic makeup. So let's start with this idea of Liechtenstein as a genetic time capsule. I mean, what does that actually mean?
Well, it's quite literal in many ways. Historians consistently point out that Liechtenstein has remained one of the most genetically isolated populations in Central Europe. We're talking over 700 years.
700 years. Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't really by chance. It's a mix of things. It's unique geography, very mountainous, creating natural barriers, and also, historically, very strict marriage practices, especially, among the noble families back in the day. These factors together just dramatically limited genetic mixing for, well, centuries.
And the numbers really back that up, don't they? I read that scientists found over 72% of Liechtensteiners share this common genetic fingerprint through their mothers, traced all the way back to early Alpine settlers.
That's right, over 72%. And that rate is, more than double what you see right next door in Switzerland.
Double. That's incredible.
It is. And this level of isolation, well, it basically turns Liechtenstein into this unique, long-running natural experiment, you could say. It lets scientists see genetic traits and how they're expressed over centuries in a way you just don't see often. It really is like a biological time capsule. It's preserved traits that have long since diffused or just vanished from the wider European population.
That biological time capsule idea is really powerful. Okay, so beyond just preserving old traits, what specific hard data has emerged that's really got geneticists talking? What are they actually finding inside that time capsule today?
Yeah, the hard data has definitely stirred the pot. There was a key population genomics report back in 2021. And it found Liechtenstein has an exceptionally low genetic heterogeneity index. It's GHI. It was 0.39.
Okay, 0.39 GHI. What does that actually mean for a non-scientist?
Right. Well, basically, it suggests a remarkably uniform gene pool, much less diverse than any other non-island nation in Europe. So while that points to this amazing genetic continuity over time, it also hints at some pretty significant potential health implications.
Okay, health implications. Can you give us a concrete example?
Absolutely. Researchers have seen that around 6 to 8% of the population carries these rare autosomal recessive traits. These are conditions that, only show up if you inherit 2 copies of a specific gene variant, one from each parent. And a notable example is a specific Liechtenstein variant of congenital deafness. It's almost unseen anywhere else.
Wow. 6 to 8% is quite high for rare traits.
It is, and it's not just deafness. There's also a striking incidence of von Willebrand disease.
The blood clotting disorder.
Exactly. It's twice as high in Liechtenstein as it is in Austria or Germany. And researchers directly attribute this to these shared ancestral lines within that small isolated population. These patterns really show the impact of that long history.
So we've got this picture of centuries of isolation shaping the gene pool, these unique health patterns emerging. But the story gets even more complex, maybe even controversial, when we bring in the royal family, right? How do they fit into this genetic puzzle?
They're a really crucial piece, yeah. You see, Liechtenstein's royal family only formally stopped arranging marriages among the nobility in the mid-20th century. Quite late, really.
Early 10th century, okay.
Right. And this long history has led some geneticists to talk about what they call a dynastic bottleneck. It's a bit controversial, this theory, but it suggests that repeated intermarriages within those elite bloodlines, well, like a bottleneck restricts flow, it might have concentrated both certain, say, genius traits and specific genetic risks within the country's upper layers.
Okay, a dynastic bottleneck. That's quite a term. And some people actually link this to things like innovation. I heard something about patent filings.
That's where it gets provocative, yes. Some argue quite boldly, actually, that these sort of extreme cognitive sharpness you see evidence for. I mean, Liechtenstein has among the highest per capita patent filings in Europe.
Really? Higher per capita?
Yeah, very high. So the argument goes, maybe this is a side effect of concentrating certain high IQ genes through those historical marriage patterns.
But that sounds like a huge leap. Is there solid evidence for that direct link, or is it
Yeah.
more speculative?
That's exactly where the controversy kicks in. Critics push back really hard against that specific idea. They point out, quite rightly, that this kind of genetic homogeneity can also amplify risks, like for certain mental health conditions. So the core question becomes, is this concentration of traits actually a benefit overall, or does it pose a significant risk to the population? It's a real debate.
Right. And that debate seems to lead directly into this really charged concept of genetic purity, doesn't it? What are the main arguments there?
Oh, absolutely. And you see these two starkly opposing viewpoints clashing. It's quite striking. On one side, you have some anthropologists who, perhaps surprisingly, praise Liechtenstein.
Yeah.
They see it as a model of genetic conservation. They argue it offers this invaluable insight into ancient Alpine resilience, like a unique living archive.
A living archive. Okay. And the other side?
Well, the other side includes a significant number of scientists and ethicists who warn that this very idea of genetic purity is just a dangerously slippery slope. It evokes these deeply disturbing parallels with, eugenic ideologies from the 20th century.
Yeah, you can see how that language would raise alarms.
Exactly. So even within the scientific community, there's this profound disagreement. Should the Liechtenstein gene pool be celebrated as this unique historical record? Or should it actually be viewed as a genetically at-risk microcosm that maybe needs careful diversification? The perspectives are just miles apart.
Okay, so setting aside the really heated debate for a moment, what is it, from a purely scientific angle, that makes this gene pool so genuinely special? You mentioned researchers point to three core reasons.
That's right. Three main things stand out. First is continuity. Unlike most of Europe, Liechtenstein just didn't experience much war-driven migration or ethnic dilution over the centuries, and this allowed for this really remarkable preservation of early medieval genetic markers. It gives us a rare glimpse into sort of ancestral European DNA.
Okay, continuity. Makes sense. What's the second?
Second is altitude adaptation. Some studies suggest there might be rare alleles, specific gene versions linked to things like better oxygen processing, maybe better cold resilience. Among people living in the higher alpine zones of Liechtenstein, traits that would have been, really advantageous for survival there.
Ah, interesting. Adaptation to the environment. And the third?
The third is what's termed cognitive clustering. Now, this one is definitely sensitive territory. But there is a documented high concentration of families who've been involved in science, engineering, innovation for generations. And this raises questions, quite controversial questions, about whether there's some kind of hereditary intelligence clustering going on. It's hotly debated, of course.
Okay, so continuity, altitude adaptation, and this cognitive clustering idea.
Exactly. And if you put those together, they paint this really complex and, frankly, quite intriguing genetic picture of this tiny nation. It really is a lot to think about. Yeah. So wrapping this up, after exploring all this, is the Liechtenstein gene pool ultimately a gift to science, or is it more of a genetic red flag?
Well, that central tension really remains unresolved, doesn't it? You have one side championing it as just compelling evidence of evolutionary uniqueness, a real treasure trove for research. But then others fear it starkly highlights the inherent risks that come with prolonged reproductive isolation.
And the debate carries on into practical questions too, right? Like creating a national genome bank.
Precisely. There's this growing call from some circles to create a national genome bank, to protect these unique traits, preserve them for future study. But then almost immediately, you have bioethicists raising these stark warnings about the potential for misuse, highlighting just how sensitive this kind of genetic data is. It really forces you to grapple with some big questions like, do you think preserving such a distinct gene pool is, important? Or is it dangerously close to that slippery slope we mentioned? Should small nations like Liechtenstein actively try to diversify their DNA? Or should they proudly protect what makes them genetically unique? Is this just cutting-edge science? Or does it sometimes tread too close to problematic ideologies? What really stands out to IU as you hear all this?